1 minute, she was cool, she was fine, she laid back for a minute. Next thing I know, she was dead. I don't know what caused it. I did not cause it or anything like that.
The evidence shows a relationship between the two men, but not an intentional or premeditated homicide.
I can't comfort her when she's hurting. I can't share the everyday joys or frustrations that we used to bond over. That part of my life, of our life, is gone.
Some people spend years building a life. Others lose their freedom in a single moment. 2 roommates were never seen again. Another ended with a respected neurosurgeon found hidden inside his own home. These weren't crimes solved overnight. They exposed dark secrets and ended with decades or even life behind bars. Let's begin.
I'm also not guilty of solicitation to commit deliberate homicide in any way whatsoever.
A home in rural Montana became the scene of a chilling double murder. 2 roommates disappeared without a trace, and for years, no one was held responsible. But when one witness finally broke her silence, investigators uncovered a crime far darker than they had imagined. In the spring of 2013, Thomas Korjak, 62, and Robert Orozco, 37, were living with Caressa Hardy in a home outside Frenchtown, Montana. The argument was over money, and living arrangements ended in a rampage when Hardy shot both men inside the house. Authorities later believed the victims' bodies were burned in an attempt to hide the crime. Despite the murders, no arrests were made for years because the only eyewitnesses, Karen Hardy, feared coming forward. She later told investigators she had remained silent because she was afraid Hardy would harm her or others if police confronted him. Eventually, in 2015, she decided she could no longer keep the secret and reported everything she had witnessed. Karen's statement reopened the investigation. Detectives searched the property, interviewed neighbors, and gathered forensic evidence. Investigators later recovered human remains and evidence that supported the prosecution's case. While Hardy was in jail awaiting trial, prosecutors alleged he tried to silence the key witness. Jail inmates testified that Hardy offered money to have Karen Hardy killed before she could testify. One inmate told jurors Hardy offered $10,000 to have her shot so she could not be identified. Those allegations resulted in 2 additional charges of solicitation to commit deliberate homicide. The case went to trial in May 2019 and lasted 9 days. Karen Hardy took the witness stand and described witnessing the killings. Prosecutors also presented testimony from neighbors, investigators, forensic experts, and jail inmates who claimed Hardy confessed details of the murders or discussed eliminating witnesses. One of the neighbors said,
"It wasn't a normal burning some trash smell, it wasn't anything like that. It was very odd odor."
Physical evidence and human remains recovered during the investigation were presented to support the eyewitness account. Hardy's defense argued that Korjak and Orozco had simply disappeared to avoid financial and legal problems, claiming they had fled instead of being murdered. The jury rejected that theory after considering the testimony and forensic evidence. According to prosecutors, Hardy believed Korjak and Orozco were planning to cut him off financially from the lifestyle they shared. They argued that fear of losing financial support led him to kill both men. Prosecutors also said his later attempts to have Karen Hardy killed showed he was determined to prevent the truth from reaching a courtroom. After deliberations, the jury found Caressa Hardy guilty of 2 counts of deliberate homicide for the murders of Thomas Korjak and Robert Orozco. The jury also convicted Hardy on 2 counts of solicitation to commit deliberate homicide for trying to arrange the killing of the key witness while he was in jail. On June 21, 2019, the judge sentenced Hardy to 4 life sentences. Although Hardy continued to insist he was innocent, the court ruled that the evidence proved his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Under Montana law, Hardy will first become eligible for parole in 2047. As the verdict was read, he maintained his innocence and said,
I'm innocent of all 4 of these allegations and charges.
For the families of Thomas Korjak and Robert Orozco, the verdict ended years of unanswered questions. Karen Hardy's decision to speak out not only helped solve a double murder, but also exposed the alleged efforts to silence her forever. A witness's courage finally exposed a double murder that had remained hidden for years. But our next case began with a desperate Facebook message, one that would become a chilling warning of what was about to happen.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree.
A cryptic Facebook message was sent late one night. By morning, deputies responding to a welfare check made a grim discovery inside a shared apartment, and the man she trusted the most was charged with murder. A late-night argument inside a shared apartment took a deadly turn. Hours later, a crashed vehicle, a a troubling confession, and a welfare check would unravel a grim discovery behind a terrifying murder. On the night of March 13, 2024, 31-year-old Taylor Escontrius was inside the Parkview, Iowa apartment she shared with her boyfriend, Christopher Bahal. The couple had met in rehab, and both struggled with alcoholism. Sometime that night, Taylor was subjected to a prolonged and violent attack. According to prosecutors, she suffered multiple blunt force injuries before being stabbed repeatedly with both a screwdriver and a knife. An autopsy later documented 23 stab wounds from a screwdriver, 17 stab wounds from a knife, and additional injuries caused by a baseball bat. Just before the attack, Taylor sent a chilling Facebook message to a friend that read, "If I get killed, it was Chris. Don't reply right now, he's nuts." The message would later become one of the prosecution's most powerful pieces of evidence. In the early hours of March 14th, Bahal crashed his car into a light pole in Mount Joy, Iowa. Deputies responding to the crash found him intoxicated, with a knife near his feet. While receiving treatment in a hospital, Bahal told deputies that he had been drinking and had experienced visions of beating Taylor with a baseball bat. Concerned by his statements, deputies went to the couple's apartment to check on her welfare. Inside, they discovered Taylor dead. Bahal was arrested. He was initially charged with multiple offenses, including first-degree murder, and pleaded not guilty. Christopher Bahal's trial began in March 2025. Prosecutors argued that the use of 3 separate weapons showed deliberation and premeditation. They presented forensic evidence, Bahal's recorded statements, and Taylor's final Facebook message, warning that Chris would be responsible if she was killed. The defense argued there was no proof the killing had been planned. Bahal testified that he had been heavily intoxicated and claimed he could not remember the attack. His attorneys asked jurors to consider voluntary manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. After 6 days of testimony, the case was handed to the jury. Prosecutors argued that the attack was intentional, pointing to the use of multiple weapons. The defense maintained that Bahal's intoxication and lack of memory meant the state had failed to prove premeditation. On March 11, 2025, the jury found Christopher Bahal guilty of first-degree murder and domestic mistreatment with intent to inflict serious injury. On May 30, 2025, a Scott County judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, followed by a consecutive 2-year sentence on the household mistreatment conviction. The court also ordered him to pay $150,000 in restitution to Taylor's 2 children.
Brutally killing his girlfriend back in March will be sentenced later today. 31-year-old Christopher Bahal was found guilty of first-degree murder and...
However, he showed no signs of remorse while the verdict was read. Taylor's family described the devastating impact of her death through emotional victim impact statements, while her mother said,
"Justice has prevailed, and that's what we wanted."
Taylor left behind 2 young children whose lives were permanently changed by the deadly attack. Although the life sentence ensured Bahal would never be released, it could never heal the heartbreak endured by those who loved her. Christopher Bahal's fate was sealed by overwhelming evidence, but our next case began with an argument that ended in gunfire.
I wept uncontrollably almost every waking minute for months after this tragedy. That led to me writing a death note and attempting to kill myself by what can only be described as divine intervention.
A disagreement inside a New Hampshire apartment turned deadly. A young mother was shot in the head, 2 small children vanished with their father, and an Amber Alert sparked a frantic search. Months later, a jury would decide whether it was self-defense or murder. On February 29, 2024, Dustin Duren and Caitlin Nafziger, the mother of his 2 daughters, were inside Duren's apartment in Berlin, New Hampshire. According to prosecutors, the 2 argued after Caitlin had spent the day at the apartment. What started as a domestic dispute quickly escalated into a deadly act. Authorities said Caitlin was sitting on a couch, wrapped in a blanket and unarmed, when Duren picked up a handgun and shot her once in the head. She died at the scene, leaving behind her 2 young daughters. Instead of calling for help, Duren took the children and drove away, triggering immediate concern for their safety. When officers discovered Caitlin's body, they also realized the couple's daughters were missing. Fearing they had been taken into a dangerous situation, authorities issued an Amber Alert and launched a statewide search. Investigators soon learned that Duren had called his mother shortly after the shooting. During that call, he admitted he had shot Caitlin, but told her the girls were safe. He also said he planned to go dark for a little while. Law enforcement eventually located the children unharmed and arrested Duren without further incident. Detectives gathered witness statements, examined the crime scene, and prepared the case for trial. During his 6-day trial, Dustin Duren testified in his own defense. He claimed he never intended to murder Caitlin and insisted he acted to protect one of their daughters. According to Duren, Caitlin refused to leave the apartment and held one of the children tightly while making threats that he would never see his daughters again. He testified that after unsuccessfully trying to pull the crying child away, he grabbed his handgun, pulled his daughter forward to create distance, and fired a single shot. Prosecutors strongly challenged that version of events. They argued there was no evidence Caitlin posed an immediate threat. They pointed out that she was unarmed, sitting on the couch and wrapped in a blanket when she was shot. The state maintained that the evidence supported a deliberate and unjustified killing. The prosecution argued that the shooting stemmed from a domestic dispute rather than any immediate danger. Duren, however, maintained that fear for his daughter's safety forced him to act. The jury ultimately rejected his self-defense claim. After hearing 6 days of testimony, jurors found Dustin Duren guilty of second-degree murder. He was also convicted of recklessly causing Caitlin Nasviger's death and was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison. He remains expressionless throughout the verdict. While the guilty verdict closed the criminal trial, it could not undo the loss suffered by Caitlin's loved ones or change the lives of the 2 young daughters who lost their mother in a single act of brutality. Taylor's cousin said,
"Because of what Dustin Duren did, I will never make a new memory with my niece."
Dustin Duren insisted he acted to protect his child, but the jury rejected his story. But our next case became even more challenging because the victim's body was never recovered.
And when it was red, and it was just so matter of fact, I was so happy they saw.
A teenage girl disappeared after spending the night with her cousin. Months after searching led nowhere, her body was never found, and nearly 2 years later, a relentless investigation uncovered a startling truth. In January 2022, 17-year-old Zion Foster of East Point, Michigan, vanished after leaving with her cousin, Jalen Brazier. When questioned by investigators, Brazier initially claimed he had not seen Zion for several months. As the investigation progressed, he changed his story. Brazier admitted that Zion had been at his home the night she disappeared. He claimed they had been smoking substances together when she suddenly died. Rather than calling an emergency or seeking medical help, he said he panicked. According to Brazier, he placed Zion's body in a dumpster after midnight and left the scene. Investigators searched tirelessly for Zion Foster. Landfills were excavated, evidence was carefully examined, and detectives spent 18 months building the case. Despite extensive searches, Zion's body was never recovered. Prosecutors also uncovered Brazier's earlier false statements to police. In 2022, he pleaded no contest to lying to investigators and served nearly 10 months in jail. As more evidence emerged, authorities charged him with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. At trial, prosecutors argued that the evidence pointed to Brazier's responsibility for Zion's death, even though her body had never been found. Brazier continued to deny killing his cousin, insisting she died unexpectedly and that he simply disposed of her body out of panic instead of reporting the death. The jury rejected his explanation and found him guilty of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. The exact cause of Zion Foster's death has never been publicly established because her body was never recovered. Brazier maintained that her death was accidental, while prosecutors argued the evidence proved he was responsible for killing her and then concealing the crime. In June 2024, a Wayne County judge sentenced Jalen Brazier to 38 to 90 years in prison for second-degree murder. He also received an additional 5 to 10 years for tampering with evidence, to be served consecutively. The court credited him with 365 days already served.
And I believe that Mr. Brazier has demonstrated that. He was previously convicted in Macomb County for the same situations revolving around this incident. He was released on parole.
He remained stone-faced throughout the hearing. Following the sentencing, Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy praised the investigators and prosecutors who refused to give up on Zion's case. Although the conviction brought accountability, Zion Foster's body has never been found, leaving her family without the chance to lay their loved one to rest. Zion Foster's family never got the chance to bring her home, but our next case follows the murder of a respected neurosurgeon, where stolen valuables and months of digital evidence led investigators to the person responsible.
Mr. Burks had been in that Range Rover before, which would show...
A respected Detroit neurosurgeon vanished without a trace after missing a family visit. Days later, his luxury SUV, suspicious financial activity, and a gruesome discovery inside his own home uncovered a murder that investigators spent more than a year piecing together. On April 22, 2023, Dr. Devin Hoover, a well-known Detroit neurosurgeon, disappeared after failing to meet his family. Police first became involved when officers responded to a parking complaint and found Dr. Hoover's Range Rover abandoned and appeared to be disturbed inside. The following day, after relatives requested a welfare check, officers returned to Dr. Hoover's home. They noticed something disturbing near the back entrance and forced their way inside. During a search of the residence, they found Dr. Hoover's body hidden in a third-floor attic crawl space. His body had been wrapped in a carpet and hidden in the attic crawl space. An autopsy later confirmed he had been shot twice in the back of the head. Investigators soon discovered that Dr. Hoover's wallet, phone, designer watches, and financial cards were missing. In the days after his death, more than $30,000 was stolen through fraudulent transactions from his bank accounts. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage, analyzed phone records, and collected hundreds of pieces of evidence. Their investigation revealed thousands of text messages between Dr. Hoover and Desmond Burks, showing the two had an intimate relationship. Surveillance cameras also captured Burks driving Dr. Hoover's Range Rover after the killing. The investigation stretched across 5 states and 3 countries, involving dozens of investigators and more than a year of work. As jury selection began in January 2026, Desmond Burks pleaded guilty to second-degree murder instead of proceeding to trial. He also admitted guilt to larceny of more than $20,000, using a computer to commit a crime, being a felon in possession of a firearm, and a felony firearm charge. The guilty plea brought one of Detroit's most complex homicide investigations to a close. Prosecutors alleged Burks killed Dr. Hoover with premeditation before stealing his money, luxury SUV, designer watches, and other valuables. They argued the fraudulent financial transactions and stolen property linked Burks directly to the crime. In February 2026, a judge sentenced Desmond Burks to 35 to 60 years in prison for second-degree murder, along with a 5-year consecutive sentence for the firearm conviction. Instead of showing any remorse, he smirks while the verdict was read. During sentencing, Dr. Hoover's sister, Lila Graber, described the devastating impact the murder had on their family.
Yvonne's death has affected every member of our large family, each one in slightly different ways. One of the heaviest burdens is knowing the devastating blow it was to our 85-year-old father to lose his only son.
Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy praised the investigators, saying the case required more than a year of relentless work, hundreds of pieces of evidence, and an enormous digital investigation before justice could finally be served. These killers came from different backgrounds, but every case ended the same way, with innocent lives lost, families forever changed, and lengthy prison sentences. In the end, the courtroom delivered justice, but no sentence could erase the pain left behind or bring the victims back to the people who loved them. And if you want even more content, join our membership for exclusive videos and early access to every upload. Your support helps us keep telling these stories. Just click the join button below. Thanks for watching.